Hey guys, hope everyone is doing well today. For today's video, I'm going to do my best to try and finish up the Q&A. As you can see, I'm in a different spot than I usually am. I'm currently visiting my dad at his house, and so it's a treat to see him and be on vacation a little bit and be in a different place. During this COVID period, it's nice to just go to be in a different spot. But I want to continue kind of making videos for you while I visit him here and not just sort of disappear from the channel. So Raph and I were hoping to do this video together, but our work schedules just are not aligning very well right now, so we're unable to make a lot of videos together. Unfortunately, you'll just be hearing sort of my opinions today. I think the videos tend to be better, and certainly the Q&As I think are better when we're both here, because we can both give you our perspectives on things. But I'll do my best to sort of answer your questions as transparently as possible. And hopefully I can give you guys some good information. I never read any of the questions beforehand, and so I'm just going to give you guys my honest responses off the top of my head. So Joshua Eddy asks, Jake, please look into your crystal ball and let me know if you think I will see a 10 times return on my Harry Potter booster box position over the next 3 to 5 years. Then he says, I joke, I know that 10 times is a guarantee, laugh out loud. Serious question. How has your experience been grading the 97 card set with cards you've submitted to PSA? I know when you reviewed the set, you briefly touched on that it was difficult. Wanted to see if you saw a low percentage PSA 10 ratio, or if the difficulty was based on certain cards, prisms. With such low pops, it is always difficult to try and analyze this. Yeah, knowing that with the recent increase in the pop reports, most likely to grow. Right. As always, appreciate the great content. Really excellent question. An important question for anyone interested in investing in these or collecting them, to know like what's the right time to buy. Because if a lot more of these get graded and a lot, particularly like because the PSA 10s are starting to get very expensive, if a lot more of those PSA 10s get graded, it could definitely bring the price down in the future, depending on how many more collectors want these, which the demand could also definitely continue to grow as more eyes get on these. So in terms of like difficulty to grade, they are, from my personal experience, they are very difficult to grade. I do get like quite a few 9s, but getting 10s is very, very difficult. I've sent in a few, at least 4 or 5 of them that I really felt confidently were 10s because I couldn't see anything wrong with them. They were really pristine cards. Of course, you never know if you're going to get a 10 for sure and can never bank on getting a 10, but I thought that they were, had very, very strong chances at 10s, and they all came back 9s, and I don't know why. I don't see any errors on them. And that's just sort of the reality, I think, of these cards, because they're just very hard, I think, to measure the borders. They have so much, prism and shine to them. It can be very hard to see if there is a tiny scratch or anything there, and then centering on the back too can be difficult to tell. So, definitely difficult cards to grade, I think. But yeah, as we see more and more graded, that may change over time. It's such a good question in general because more broadly speaking, like there are lots of cards that are pretty niche, but might get quite popular in the future, because they've always maybe been undervalued or undernoticed, not many of them have been graded, and so we don't really know exactly how difficult they are to grade unless you've seen a lot of those cards and been able to sort of figure that out for yourself without looking at the pop reports. And when I think back to like my earlier experiences in Pokemon, like there were a lot less of all the Wizards of the Coast First Edition holos graded, and interestingly over time, some of what were like the most difficult cards to grade, certainly not all of them, some of them really remained the most, but actually the numbers did change over time. And interestingly, like some of the cards that were really expensive, like in Fossil, for example, were the most expensive, ended up like a number more of those 10s were able to eventually be graded. And then the overall the value of that card ended up not going up as quickly as cards that ended up being harder to grade, and we only were able to see that over time, which gets to the point of this question: when more of the pop report was filled out. And so really important stuff to be thinking about when you're investing in cards. I think like those, like a really good thing can be like those level X's, those primes. Like if you're looking to invest in those, a lot more of those might be graded, and they do seem extremely difficult to be graded, but it'll be interesting to see which ones remain really low pop and which ones maybe get filled out more. So cool question. And I think worth spending that much time on. Devil's Advocate 39 asks, hey, might be interesting to discuss where Pokemon might be going next as far as creative direction. And maybe about the new Netflix release Pokemon just had and the new VMAX Charizard decks no one seems to be talking about. So I've watched like the Netflix Pokemon. I actually watched a few episodes of that and I did really enjoy it. For people who are interested in checking that out. Yeah, in terms of like where, like creatively where Pokemon might go next, I don't know. I think there's a lot of hankering. I think that, like, for example, like the video games are such an important part, and what comes to mind, the video games are such an important part of the franchise, and I think so many people love the video game so much, and it also brought so many people into the game initially when we were kids with like Red and Blue, and I think it has the possibility of like, the Sword and Shield game that was just released. Some of my adult friends started playing that, and it got them, like, it reminded them of Pokemon. So I think as the games get kind of better graphics and more beautiful, it's going to potentially and can be played on sort of different, like the Nintendo Switch, for example, or can be played on sort of higher graphic systems. We may see that may affect the definitely I think actually would affect the Pokemon card market. And, that game, I actually haven't played that game because I don't own a Nintendo Switch. I do want to play that game probably eventually, but I heard that game like is gorgeous. The wild area and stuff is a big hit, but that some of like the story isn't that interesting, and some people didn't really like that it's kind of just the same old mechanics, even though it's the graphics are a lot better. And so I think if Pokemon created, maybe improved on that game in the next one, that type of thing could bring even more in, and even people who aren't maybe that interested in just Pokemon and the Pokemon format, like if they create a game that has a really compelling and interesting story, that could really bring in a lot of different non-Pokemon fans, which could eventually bring them into the franchise, which could eventually bring them into the cards. So the rest of what Pokemon is doing is very important to the card part of Pokemon in terms of bringing more eyes and more people into it. Stephen Lee asks, I appreciate you guys trying to connect with the viewers, fellow collectors, but I do have a question as someone who's getting back into WotC collecting. I already have a base set, master set, and plan on holding it through my lifetime, but I want to begin collecting another raw master set from WotC. What set do you think is reasonably priced raw and has a slightly higher potential growth power than its fellow WotC set? Non-first edition, simply because my resources won't allow. Thanks again for what you guys are trying to bring to the table for the community. I don't have like a specific set in mind. I think that it's and I'm not really looking for to buy these like raw unlimited cards, so I'm not really tapped into like the market to find like where the value is. But the important things to know in that and to kind of figure out for yourself is you want to think about like what sets do you think are going to do the best and the longest. What are the sets that are the most popular with people, and what sets do you see the least? So for example, like I think it's pretty fair to say that like all the Neo sets, there just aren't as many out there, and that includes Unlimited. And I don't really see a lot of like Unlimited boxes of Neo compared to I do see quite a few like comparatively like Jungle and Fossil Unlimited, and a lot of base set Unlimited. That's the one I see the most. And so I think when you think about like, as long as the popularity always remains for the Neo sets, and I'm not sure the Neo sets will ever be as popular as the base set and then Jungle Fossil and Team Rocket and the gyms, because I think more, everyone in my generation sort of collected those the most. But I think if the Neo sets can compete in sort of popularity, and you can get those Neo sets for a little bit less value, there is less of that. There are less of those cards, I think, in the world, and particularly less of those cards are going to come on the world that are in gem mint quality. So if you can get those cards at like a good value, those are probably a good buy. Also like the E series, there's definitely less of those. Probably even less of those than unlimited Neos, although maybe similar, who knows, right? That's sort of a guessing game. In my own personal experience, I've found the E-Series even less, like so few collections have I bought that there were actually like a bunch of E-Series hollows in them. The issue with the E-Series is now I think you're getting a bit less popular now than even Neo. And so I think as you kind of moved away from base set, it kind of got a little bit less popular. There's a little bit less nostalgia connected to each of those. What you have with E-Series though is you have such great art, and you have those crystals which are really cool. So there's a lot to think about, and there really isn't like an easy answer of what's undervalued. Unfortunately, it's sort of do your research, learn, and make your own decisions for yourself. But I certainly don't have like a crystal ball for what's going to go up the most. It's sort of something we can just try to make our arguments and do our best to sort of predict that, based on our understanding and the research that we do, and the understanding of the market and of both the sort of objective facts of the market, but also those subjective emotional elements. So Max K asks, is it worth it to grade all of my old cards? WotC, Diamond, Pearl, EX era, basically different cards from base set around 2008, even though I expect most to get between 5 to 8. Some a little lower and some 9s and 10s. And by worth it, I mean will increase their value now and in the future enough to justify the price to grade them. I have around 200 cards. So one piece of advice I always give to people is if you're not sure if you should grade your cards or not, grading some can be good just for the experience, so you can get a sense of like, what do these cards really grade? And just kind of if you have like anxiety about grading, just getting over that hump of like actually figuring out how to do it for yourself. And I think that grading for yourself is a much better option generally, particularly, if you're going to grade a lot, it's definitely a better option than going through a service that'll be more expensive. But if you're just grading a few cards, you can use their membership, so you don't have to buy your own membership, and they can do pre-grading and other things to ease your anxiety. But for people who really expect to be in the hobby a long time and want to grade a lot of cards, I think grading yourself is certainly the smartest way to go and financially the best way to go. And so doing sort of a practice round can be really good for that. But what I tell people who sort of aren't in that category or who don't really feel that anxiety is that don't be in any rush to grade. Particularly in in a market right now, which is more speculative right now than it was 6, 7, 8 months ago. And what I mean by speculative is the prices are more all over the place. You have a lot of people sort of buying and selling, and there's a lot more activity. And when there's a lot more activity, we don't really know exactly where the prices are going to settle right now. And a lot of people are arguing different things, right? And so when you don't know where a lot of the prices are going to settle, and if you send your cards to PSA, they may not be back now for 6 months or more, because there's such a long line at PSA, there's so many cards. I think maybe holding them and waiting to see where the prices settle, and then you can sort of decide, financially, if now it makes sense to send them in, is always an option if you're sort of on the fence. I do that all the time. Like I have plenty of cards that I, kind of hold and keep, and that are sort of my, could be graded pile. I have my definite graded pile, and those are the cards that I think are always going to be like good Pokemon investments, are always going to retain their value, are always going to have like demand as long as Pokemon stays somewhat relevant in people's lives. And then I have a lot more cards that are in that sort of like in-between space that I wait for what makes, for when it makes the most sense to send them in, and when I feel really comfortable that I'm not going to sort of lose money on them. So that would be my advice on that. As long as you keep your cards well protected, they're not going to get in worse condition. By just having them sort of sit in a safe space, within your collection. Do you have any sealed product? And if so, what are some of your greatest items? Oh boy. As Simon Gamer 987 asked that question. So I have very little sealed product. My greatest items, if by greatest you mean most expensive items, and most expensive items are actually just packs. I have like WotC packs of some of the different sets, and I have multiples of some of them because I like the arts. I like having the arts for some of those, some of my favorite arts. I don't have any, I have some like modern product that I open occasionally for fun, and I tend to buy the newest set sometimes when I like the set. And then once in a while I have like an extra one that I keep, to either open in the future or potentially resell if the prices go up. But I'm really, really not into like that sort of flipping thing. I more do it to kind of lock in product that I want to open, that I think I'll want to open in the future in case people speculate on it a lot and it drives the price up in the short term. Yeah, so nothing too crazy or wild or interesting. Miguel Lilly asks, could you address the idea of having a slowly built up tall knowledge base rather than a rapidly built up wide one? I already know about this personally, but I feel as though tons of new people need to understand this concept. They're so wrapped up with what's the best investment that they don't actually fully understand any part of the market, which leaves them very vulnerable to any downturns around the market. Okay. Having a slowly built up tall knowledge base rather than a rapidly built up wide one. So I honestly like, and apologize for my my slowness. I'm not 100% sure what you're asking here, but the last part of it, they're so wrapped up with what's best about it, they don't actually fully understand any part of the market, which is very vulnerable. So I guess you're asking that maybe people don't have good enough kind of like sort of wide range of all of the different parts of the hobby, and that some people become really niche or really expert on certain parts that they like to invest in, but they don't understand like how the whole market works, and so they might either miss out on good investments. I think that can definitely be true. I think that certain people definitely, to throw out a name like Z&G, he has definitely like a niche, like he's really tuned in to like the booster boxes right now, but doesn't have like knowledge, much knowledge on all the specific trophy cards or all the specific, more of like the modern cards and what's going on there. And, I think that would make it that he, is at, I'm not gonna say it, I wouldn't say it like risk, because I think what he understands and what he's investing in are like some of the best investable, most investable items in this hobby and are super safe items. But could he make more money if he was an expert in all of the areas and knew when to put more money in that area or that area? Probably. But maybe not, because then it would drag him, across too many different areas, and so he wouldn't be able to have quite that level of in-depth knowledge on the items that he's specifically buying, and being quite as plugged into that market, which is really making him a lot of money and helping him sort of build his get to sort of his collection goals. So I think that there's sort of a balance to be had. I think that I tend to try to have pretty broad knowledge of a lot of things, but there are certain things like that I don't have great knowledge of. Like one of the biggest areas that I'm trying to learn about now, for example, are error cards, because I don't really have a great knowledge of all the different like niche error cards and exactly how rare they are, because I've just never collected much of those error cards, and I was sort of very focused in on knowing like the pop numbers and tracking all of the data on just like all of the trophy cards and set cards that I was interested in, and so I never got to that point. And now I'm sort of finding where I feel like I have a lot of those things under control, sort of in my head, or a fairly good understanding. And so now I'm going into more of those niche, another niche area, which is like error cards and learning about that. So hopefully that somewhat addressed your question, and I think is a really good question. Blitz Foray asks, well, a question I cannot seem to find anywhere, no matter where I look, is if the Heart Gold Soul Silver was printed a lot or was barely printed. It would be nice if you guys knew the answer to this. Also, am I wrong to assume that acquiring old Pokemon cards with shiny Pokemon art is a safe bet to buy? This mostly stems from Hidden Fate's success, showing us that people love their favorite Pokemon in a shiny art form. Why ask this? Well, I believe I stumbled across some interesting old TCG sets where there are shiny cards that not everyone necessarily knows about. Yeah, so I think that I think shiny cards are pretty widely. I think almost all collectors really like the shiny cards. I think the game, if you look at the game culture too, like people are hunting, right, and chasing those shiny cards. So generally buying shiny forms of Pokemon, that's an element that attracts. I don't think shiny is very niche within Pokemon. I actually think shiny is something that attracts, hits almost all the collectors, or the vast majority of collectors across the board. So generally that's a big plus. And if any card is shiny, I think that adds something to it. But you have to be really careful that that's only one element, right? So, at the end of the day, it's all about supply and demand. And so even if the demand gets raised a little bit because of the shiny cards, if there's so much supply of something, it may not work out for you. So that's just sort of one element to that adds to popularity of a Pokemon is if it's shiny or not. And then in terms of the Heart Gold Soul Silver question. I don't know the answer to like how much of that is printed. I don't see it that much. I see it a little bit. I've come across people who have it, who have boxes of it. I've come across people who have like who say they have like a lot of the product, in pretty good condition. Either sealed or sort of still in mint condition, the specific cards that they pulled. Until I see a lot more of it on eBay, and I see a lot more of those cards graded in the pop report, the way that I operate is like anything, there's risk in Pokemon, and there could be a lot more of anything. But as the prices get higher and higher on those items, we're likely going to see more of that come on the market. And if we don't, the higher the prices get, if we don't see more and more of that product on the market, you have to assume that it's probably pretty rare. And if you don't see more and more of those cards graded, you have to assume that the set probably wasn't printed very much overall. So those are the indicators that I would suggest you just pay attention to and keep a lookout for. Champion O asks, Pokemon is reprinting Ultra Prism. Any idea why? Also, do you think the same will happen to sets like Unbroken Bonds and Tag Team? Thanks. I definitely don't know why they decided to reprint Ultra Prism. Ultra Prism had like a smaller, that's what people say, right? That it wasn't printed as much. And so, I've heard people say like maybe Pokemon is just trying to like even it out and make it have similar distribution to like some of the other sets. I have no idea. That seems like all speculation unless those people actually have like connections at the Pokemon company. Also, do you think the same will happen to sets like Unbroken Bonds and Tag Team? I think anything can happen. I think any of these sets could be reprinted at any time. I think even older sets, even like XY sets could potentially be, reprinted. Like this idea that they just won't because they haven't, like if Pokemon decides it gets to a point in the demand where like people really want that, they might print it. Of course it might really hurt the consumer confidence if they do that, because a lot of people are buying the product to speculate and invest on it. And if Pokemon reprints like a doomsday for a lot of people would be if they like printed like Flash Fire, right? A set like that, which like didn't seem to be that heavily printed and has that first, full art Charizard card from the modern sets. If that got printed, I think it would really shake a lot of people's confidence going forward in investing in any sort of, modern product or semi-modern product. I think it's unlikely, right, that they're going to unprint something like that, but I think it's possible. The farther you get along, just like common sense would say that it's less and less likely they're going to reprint it because they would have done it already. But I think, as the Pokemon market gets bigger and bigger, they're going to have to figure out what's best for them. They have many teams, and this, I'm sure, many people, on a team talking about like, what is the best strategy for them? How can they provide the best experience for the collectors, for the buyers, because they want us to stay engaged and buy the product, but also, print as much to demand as possible so that they can actually, make the most money that they can out of each of these sets. So, I have no great insight, into that, other than that, I wouldn't listen to people telling you, unless they have like connections at the Pokemon card company or connections to like lots of distributors directly who have some sort of connections. I wouldn't like listen to people really speculate on what are they going to reprint and what aren't they going to reprint. That would be my general advice on that. Michael Knight asks, before the recent WotC spikes, I was going for a complete PSA 9 Unlimited base, jungle, and fossil holo set. Do you think the cards before the recent spikes represented value for money? Also, what do you think about the prices now? Do they still represent value, or will they be at more of a risk of a retrace because Unlimited is more available? Thank you and keep up the good work. Your channel is very good. Thanks, Michael. This is sort of the $1 million question is behind this is what is driving up prices right now? Is it genuine increased demand, or is it, that's going to be sustainable for the long haul, or is it, short-term speculative interest that is going to disappear at the first sign of trouble or the first sign of retraces? And there's going to be some sort of panic. And, there are clearly people doing both things, right? There are clearly lots of brand new people in the hobby who are buying these cards because they love them. It sounds like this describes you probably. It's like you want these cards because you had them as a kid, and having them in high grade feels great. And so there are a lot of people like that, I think, coming in and pushing those prices up. But I think that there are also people who are seeing those prices go up and are excited by that and are trying to make money off of more interest, of more genuine collector interest. And so how that all balances itself out in the long run is hard to say. Any time there is a huge growth in a market in a very short period of time, I think the correct response is to be careful, particularly if you're spending money that it would really hurt to lose, because the answers just aren't there right now, like how sustainable this is going to be. Like we're gonna know so much more in 6 months to a year. And so I think buying some, and definitely trying to complete, any collecting goal you want to complete now is fine to do, and I think that it's sort of like, as long as you are not over leveraging yourself, because the reality is like this demand could absolutely be here to stay. For the foreseeable future, forever. This could be the start of a lot more demand, coming in. One of the first things I said on my first, video is that markets always move up and down, right? But predicting when they're going to move up and down is more complicated and more difficult. And so there are always going to be, better times to buy, and what I predicted and what I said is like, these prices are going to retrace eventually, but at what point, and I predicted at that point, because of the momentum of what I was seeing, that the prices were going to probably continue to go up quite a bit more, and that we had just sort of started this intense sort of demand push, which I thought was a mix of speculator flippers, resellers and collectors. So it's sort of like, depending on your own instinct on what percentage that is and how much they're going to stay in it, have we really experienced a fundamental shift in the market, or are people just spending a lot more money for the exact same cards that they could have gotten a few months ago? And a lot of this is just sort of like artificial, fear, anxiety, driving, fear and anxiety of missing out, driving the market up right now. And I don't have the answer to that. But if you were just sort of starting, I'm in a bit of a luxury position. And I think I'm going to end the key. We have a lot more questions here to go through, but I think that I prefer kind of giving full answers to the questions, and then maybe doing, we'll do another part 3 or maybe even a part 4. I think that something I think a lot about is like Jake, it's easy for you to say don't buy right now or don't have fear of missing out because you've already made so much progress on your collecting goals. if I was in the beginning and I barely made any progress on my collecting goals and I really wanted the cards, I may have been more bullish than I am now. Because I've seen what I've seen and because I've completed a decent amount of my collecting goals, I feel more comfortable not buying because I have a lot of the cards I want anyway. And if I'm wrong, right, and the vast majority of this interest is very stable and collector driven and will be continue to be collector driven into the future, I will have to pay more for the cards that I wanted than if I bought them, right now, for example. But I'm willing to do that because I've made a lot of progress and because I don't believe in paying for things based on other people's opinions and based on hype. I think you kind of have to trust your own gut and your own opinions. And I'm following my own. The advice I give to you guys, my thoughts on the market, I follow that for myself. I'm being transparent and giving you guys my honest opinion. But I think that if I had nothing in my collection, I might feel like there's some cards that I just have to have, and I'm too worried that the market may never come back to this point, and I'm worried that if it doubles again or triples again, something crazy, which is seems so unlikely to happen right now, but I'm seeing buyouts happen right now in certain cards, and even in this climate, like they're going up a lot again, and buyouts often are very speculative and driven by, probably people who are going to resell these, if not right away, somewhere down the line. But if I was in that position where I just started, like I think that I would feel more collector pressure to buy those cards because I wanted them, right? But as a pure investor, if we're moving away from being like a collector, as a pure investor, I don't ever invest in things that I don't understand. And we'll repeat this again here, but I'm much more comfortable missing out on gains that I didn't understand than following other people's advice or hype or what I perceive as some irrationality, to sort of make money off of their either luck or their superior knowledge and skill than mine in that moment. Because some people might have information that I don't have, or might have the same information but just come to a different opinion, and their conclusion might actually be better or more correct than mine. So. And that's really the goal of this channel is to, I think that framework is the correct framework to invest in, and I will definitely argue that point. But that people, because there's so many moving parts in this market, it's so hard for one to be very confident in their own sort of opinions of what direction Pokemon is going to go into the future. So I hope all of that like usual is helpful for everyone. Appreciate, thank you so much for all the continued support and subscribing and positive comments. Really, I've been having so much fun making these videos. I love talking about Pokemon. It's so cool talking about Pokemon with like a bunch of other people who are also interested in it. And my goal is also to provide useful frameworks to teach people the skills that they can use to do this for themselves, to basically do what I'm doing for themselves and be successful in building their collection or making money. So thank you for listening. Thank you for subscribing. Thank you for liking, commenting on the videos. It helps with all the algorithm, and it helps us sort of move towards achieving our goals of trying to be sort of the biggest channel we can be. And reaching as many people as possible, but I think it's all about the journey, not achieving being a big channel, but sort of enjoying the process of growing and of building a channel has been really enjoyable for both me and Rafi. And so thanks for coming on that journey with us. And I will have another part to this Q&A up for you guys hopefully soon. Thank you so much for tuning in. Take care.